I'm Tom from Do-It-Yourself Home Automation, and this is a look at an error that I made when I first set up my Aerogarden hydroponic gardens. And basically, this comes with 6 slots for pods. And the model that I'm using here, I think it's the Bounty is the name of it, I think. 6 pod model. But it turns out that actually for most of the things that you would grow in these, you don't want to use all 6 of those pods. And that's kind of counterintuitive because when you receive the little pods to go in here, they give you 6 of them, and your Aerogarden has 6 pods. So you can technically plant 6, but the issue is that if you do that, your plants actually start to get pretty overcrowded, and they start to compete for resources. And one of the things I realized is that if I put in the 6 pods, then actually only about 2 or 3 of them would actually work and be viable. So I found, for example, with my herbs that the basil took off, and you can see Thai basil on the right and Genovese basil on the left, and these just completely dominated this Aerogarden, and they were shading out the other plants. So my thyme was trying to grow off the side of the garden, the mint was almost dead, and the parsley and the dill, which are smaller plants, both didn't make it at all. So actually, from what I was reading, it makes more sense to try to plant, if you're going to do basil, maybe plant 1 basil plant and then fill the other pods with 2 or 3 of the slower growing plants, or to do what I've done here ultimately, which is just to have 2 pods going with these full basil plants and just really embrace the fact that you're going to grow a lot of basil. If you had just planted the other ones, though, instead of these fast-growing ones like basil, like if I had done the dill, the mint, and the thyme, I probably could fill all 6 slots because they're about the same height. But you can see this is marked as tall on the Aerogarden pod, and that means, it's a little hard to see, but you can see on there tall. That means it's going to shade out the other plants and cause a problem. So what did I do? The parsley that I had in here, and the rather is back here, and the dill I just had to discard. But as I showed in another video, I took the thyme and I took the mint and transplanted them outside into pots. So those plants are still surviving and will be usable. And now I'm just growing a lot of basil in this one. Ditto with the tomatoes. I had 6 tomato plants growing in here, and it got crazy. It was just completely packed with tomato, even with pruning. And it's still got 3 in here, and I didn't cut back the original stems. Apparently, as I'll show in another video, when they first start to grow, you're supposed to cut them back to 1 stem per pod, and I didn't do that. So these are already kind of taking over. But I actually removed 3 of the plants because I realized as I was pulling on them that they weren't, they were only about 2 inches tall, 3 inches tall, versus the other ones in here had taken off and totally taken over this Aerogarden. So with tomatoes, they say with a 6-pod unit, you really want to plant just 2 pods, 1 on either side, and then trim them back to 1 plant. And what you end up with is 2 tomato plants, but they're using all the resources available to them here, and they'll grow a lot more tomatoes, and you'll have less of this overcrowding. So you're not wasting resources producing a bunch of this green matter. You're just going to be producing more fruit, but on fewer plants. So really interesting, helpful, not something Aerogarden makes particularly clear in their materials. But, basically if you're growing tall plants, maybe do 2 per 6-unit Aerogarden, and don't try to plant tall and short plants. If you're doing all short plants, you can probably plant 6. But again, if you're going to do tall ones like basil or tomatoes, then you're going to shade out your other plants that way. The final thing I'd say, I'm going to look at in another video, if you do remove pods like this, then you want to cover them. Otherwise, the light can cause algae to grow in the water. Aerogarden has little spacers. I'm probably just going to cover this with some gaffer's tape, and we'll see that in another video. So just avoid overcrowding. You'll probably get the same or better yields, and it's just a lot easier to manage your Aerogardens. If you found this helpful in any way, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps.